May member discussion. Today's discussion, we really wanted to focus on everything that is COVID 2021 and plans that are evolving and changing, which seem weekly, just like last year. It's funny that we're seem to be in the same situation. But we've allotted, an extra 30 minutes today if we need it. If we don't, since we have a smaller group, so be it. But we really wanted to give enough time to each of these topics for everybody to have good discussion around it, ask questions, give feedback. Part of the great thing about these meetings is that I've found, for me personally, that some of the best practices have come out of this discussion, and those best practices tend to rise to the top and are really great ideas for all of us to copy, to emulate for our own camps. Any thoughts or ideas or questions before we get going? Sheila. All right. Well, we're going to start it off here with pickup and drop off. For us, for our camp here in Colorado, the Burn Camps program at Children's Hospital Colorado, the thing that's changing about our pickup and drop off this year, and I think that we've talked a little bit about in this group, is separating that process, keeping pickup and drop off isolated in a different portion of camp, so as to not be bringing in the potential for exposure to staff and campers from the outside. So making sure that the pickup and drop off process is happening, just off site or in an isolated part of camp. I think another best practice is if parents are dropping off, that it's somewhat of a drive-through process, that the process can remain outside, well ventilated, that people necessarily aren't getting out of their cars, that just the campers are getting out, with their stuff, and then that whole check-in process is happening that way. Another great idea that I believe Daniel mentioned is that, part of the protocols, the safety health protocols, should be started right at that moment. Testing, I'm not sure that temperature checks are all that accurate, but anything else that you're going to be doing at the spot of check-in, and if for some reason that there's cause for concern or cause that a camper or a family member potentially has coronavirus, that some sort of camp in a box or the summer camp package could be given, is prepared ahead of time and could be given to that camper on site as they're trying to be dropped off, and then saying, sorry, for whatever reason, you're not allowed to come into camp this year. Here's your camp in a box. We'll be following up with you, later in the summer. Daniel's camp is co-running camp in person and virtual. So then that camper would have the opportunity to tune in virtually as well. Some camps don't have that commitment, but if there is a way to do a camp in the box to say, we're so sorry, we so wanted to spend this week with you. Unfortunately, that can't happen, but here you go. Here are some of the craft activities. Here are some of the goodness of summer camp for you to play along with at home. Any additional thoughts or questions on that process?
I'll just throw in there, I've been making sure that you guys can do it, and some of you are already doing it. So thanks for every topic that we'll discuss today regarding operations. You can go ahead and throw your ideas in the chat, or after we've kind of given a brief overview, you can tell us and unmute yourself and tell a little more about some of the topics that you all are doing. But we would love to know how you guys are planning to do drop off and pick up, and what does that look like for all of you. So feel free to use the chat throughout the discussion today, or unmute yourself when we're ready to move on.
And if we could, when somebody comes to speak, if you could introduce yourself. So I'm Kristen, I'm from the University of Utah Burn Camp Programs. It's always so fun to just know where everybody is coming from.
I'm Abby with Hoosier Burn Camp in Indiana, and our check-in process is going to begin a week from Sunday. So we are in it right now. And whew, I sure hope we don't have to do this ever again. But yeah, our drop-off is going to be, we kind of have changed a little bit of what we were kind of initially thinking. We're going to, oh, hey, there's my boss. I didn't see he was here. So, anyway, so we're going to do kind of a drive-through thing, but we're going to do a crowd control up in a different part of camp where, you know, cars are going to do all of the screenings, turn in all their paperwork, meds, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to send them down. And actually, we are going to have cars drive around and drop their kids off in front of their cabins, but it's going to be on the opposite side of the road. And we are going to allow them to step out on the opposite side of the car, on the opposite side of the road, give their kid a hug, say goodbye, and hop back in quickly. We're going to have basically just a funnel system where we're making sure that we don't have 5 cars at one cabin at one time. So we're happy to be able to offer that kind of, you know, we kind of felt like it was a little bit of humanity in all this mess, and feel like we're going to be able to do it safely. So, you know, we'll know in about a week, but that's kind of, I guess, a deviation from something that, or from what we heard.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Abby.
Yeah, it's an interesting process to think about, like restricting the number of people coming with kids for drop off, keeping people in the car, even doing that COVID test right in the car. We're asking that just one family member bring kids to camp instead of kind of the usual big group. And yeah, having people stay in the car. We will also have a box for any child who, for whatever reason, might not be able to stay at camp. Like, I think COVID's the only thing we can think of. And then we'll have some kind of it, we're calling it like a waiting packet. But we have a group that has in the past facilitated our carnival for us. And since we're not going to do a big family carnival at the end of camp, we're having that group make kind of waiting packets for us with a snack and some activities to do while people are waiting in the car. I think the only thing as I'm talking about it, Abby, and advantage you guys have is starting soon as it won't be so hot. Our camp is in early August, and so it's going to be really hot for kids to be waiting in the car.
Daniel with the Lisa Ann Rushburn Foundation Champ Camp. I've been putting some of the things that we're planning on doing, very similar to everyone else, following the same protocols. Our big focus is when they normally come to camp, we have this big welcome for them. So as they get off the buses, we're usually crazy and hugs, and it's a big like family reunion welcome, because we can't do that in the first interaction that we have with the kids when they get dropped off. Is I swab up their nose, which isn't very friendly and could be traumatizing for some of our kids. Luckily, they already would have had a PCR test before coming to camp, so it wouldn't be their first time doing it. But if they had a negative experience in it last time, they're obviously going to be nervous. So our big focus is gamification and how to make this fun and crazy. We're still a kids camp, so why don't we do that? So we want to decorate the outside area. So we purchased some banners just to make it more friendly. We have some of our counselors who are going to be administrating the test in their PPE, but also having crazy costumes in addition to that. So we'll have people definitely making it friendly and fun. We're doing a QR video. So we'll have a QR code. We'll give a piece of paper for them as we administer the COVID test. And that is going to be our welcome video, so the families and campers can watch before they actually come into camp, just to get them excited for actually looking forward to camp, as well as a snack bag and a travel bag for the family. So just some waters and granola bars and other such, as well as, because it's going to be so hot, we're going to get a bunch of ice cream, and when they show up, it's like, here's the ice cream, and wait in the car and cool off and enjoy the snack as you're waiting, so that we can get them. We're also going to be doing all of our medical screenings in the beginning. So not only COVID, but after they're done with their COVID test, then we'll do their lice check, we'll do their temperature check, we'll do, where's your medications, what are you doing? So all of that will be done in the beginning part. And then since we're doing the COVID test, just to get it all out of the way, So when they actually enter into camp and take their stuff, they're ready just to have fun and enjoy.
What are other people doing? Any other ideas for, I love that, just reminder that we are still a kids camp, Daniel, and we usually have kind of costumes and trying to make check-in, which can be sort of a long process, fun and exciting. We have a gate that we decorate in fun ways. But yeah, I think probably amping it up even a little more this year is going to be important.
The only other thing I got to think of is we do have one camper on the spectrum, and so, you know, like Daniel said, with first-year campers or children that have a little higher anxiety associated with that, it's just a tough way to greet them right off the bat. Even lice checks and that kind of stuff is tough with first-year kids if they don't know the drill and the routine. So I talked to Abby just about making certain we have kind of an extra conversation with those family members so they get a sense of, you know, we can lessen the anxiety as best as we can.
I think it's a great point, Coop. One of the things that we're doing, what we do every year, but within our packing list, we're kind of giving families a heads up, not only through our phone calls of confirmation, but also within a formal letter of how the policy is going to work when they show up. So they know ahead of time what they can expect, and that like they won't be able to get out of the car, which is a bummer. So hug your kid before you enter the gates of camp, right? To make sure that you give them all the love. So it's been really helpful, and I'm happy to share my my packing list letter that I sent out to my families. And I'm not sure if anyone else would be interested in sharing some of their documentation that they're going to be sending out to the families talking about camp. But I think that's a big way that I think is going to help us alleviate some of the confusion.
I think that's a great point, Daniel, too, because, you know, as all of us have experienced too, sometimes the anxiety, it's manifested in our minds with the kids and homesickness and new experiences. But from a parental standpoint, we've had families that you have to lovingly nudge out of camp and say, you know, they're integrating now into camp and their world. And there's a balance, you know, between allowing that natural organic farewell to take place. This year will be so much different. So for better or worse, we decided to allow kind of that contact outside of vehicle. We figure if they're riding with the person, they're living with the person, you know, all that type of stuff. But it's not like we've got a timer set, but we've definitely said, you know, that it needs to be an opportunity to say farewell, and then it's time to transition since we're moving them now into a bubble, if you will.
Sheldon Gregoire, Portland Firefighters Children's Burn Foundation here. How you all doing? So we're in a unique situation because we do winter camp, and winter's come and gone. And we bus all of our kids. We don't have the drop-off pickup, but I kind of have a unique background. I worked at a Boy Scout camp for over 10 years or so in New Hampshire. And drop-off pickups always been, you know, kind of that. This was obviously way pre-COVID pandemic. But at the same regard, we had to drop off Foot Lockers and stuff, and we created these, you know, cone lanes. I think what I'm hearing from everybody is sounds like you've all got sound ideas. I'm just curious. I know in Maine, in the state of Maine, we're over 50% vaccinated for the entire population. Here in the state of Maine, and we're like, I think we're at 70% for those 70 above, all that, you know, the different brackets. But what are you guys all doing in terms of those who are vaccinated, not vaccinated, kind of playing that world of, you know, I just wonder are you going to have parents that are going to give you a hard time saying, hey, I'm vaccinated, I don't have to wear my mask outside anymore? Obviously, up here in northern Maine, we're kind of separated from the general population, but I'm kind of curious to see how you guys are kind of touching base with those pieces.
Well, I can comment. I was seeing if anybody else had a comment before I, Kristen again from University of Utah. Boy, I think who would have ever thought that mask wearing would be such a loaded topic, but it is. And I think that the best thing that we can do is prepare families on the front end for just simply reducing the numbers of people up at camp. We're just simply, trying to make things as calm as possible. And then I think we're going to follow the CDC recommendations for, should they be wearing a mask in their own car? That's going to be whatever the CDC is saying in August. Should they be, so we're going to follow kind of what the University of Utah and the CDC is saying is best practice. But I think it's going to be, like Daniel said, a lot of preparation on the front end for families about how this is going to look different. And to use a Daniel term, to keep things equitable, we're going to ask that everybody follow the same rules so that way we're not having to check vaccine cards or anything. We're just going to keep things equitable and treat everybody the same.
Perfect. The reason I ask is, obviously, like I said, you guys are all gearing up for camp right now. And I'm sitting here going through what I'm going to be doing for January 2022. And the ironic part of my camp is I get all my kids. We come up the I-95 corridor from New Jersey all the way up through New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. We put kids on a bus. Like parents say, like I don't see our kids until they all arrive, and they're all on a big coach bus. So as I start, ramping up July, August for planning for winter camp 2022, it's curious to see. Hopefully we're outside of this whole pandemic by next year's camp. But I'm also a realist of we may still be dealing with some stuff of this, and I may still have to worry about vaccines. And then the downside is my camp is right in the middle of cold and flu season. So then you have that added component to that piece of it. So I just I'm with how we're going to play with that world.
It's a good question because 2 weeks after we get done with camp, we're taking 20 to 25 kids to whitewater raft in Tennessee, Carolina. So Abby and I have talked about what modifications, because it's just a different atmosphere. And I'm sure Kristen with the river trip, it's just a different experience, right? Than a traditional resident camp. And so I don't know if I have a great epiphany answer, but I think we just need to roll with the times. I think these calls have been fun because, here we are on May 21st and the nature of the call is so much different than it was on February 21st. So who knows exactly what September, August, November is going to look like. And if you've been following it, like all of us have, try going one day without a COVID conversation and I'll shake your hand. I just will. The fall and winter, will be a whole different ball game. So I think my best advice, Sheldon, is just let's keep doing these calls and stay tuned, and see what the world looks like. Because we know what we're doing. I know what we're doing on May 27th, 28th, Abby, through June 4th. I know what we're doing then. The rest of it's subject to, we'll know more tomorrow kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our first camp program, the adolescent program, the river trip, is June 5th. So yeah, we know about our bus ride will be, we're going to be testing before kids get out of the car at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're going to be, the bus ride, everybody will be wearing masks in the bus. We're going to have seating marked off so that, kind of following that recommendation of every other seat and opposite aisles. I don't know. We have a big bus and we're going to be able to, I made sure we had a bus big enough to space out. One adaptation we made is we've always had the kids sleeping in kind of group tents, and then the counselors have been right outside the tents on a cot. We're rugged, camping, and then just a little tent on top of the cot, like a personal one. But we went ahead and got individual tents for all of our campers so that everybody will be sleeping in their own tiny tent this year. Just that, thinking that will help with kind of the nighttime respiratory.
I just wish I was smart enough to figure out how to get onto these calls back in February.
Well, a good thing is a lot of the calls are recorded, so you can always look at the recording for some of these calls. I was going to say, if anyone missed the communicable disease call that we did last month, you can see the recording for that on our website and get that recording. If you need us to email you the link, we're happy to do so. I think my suggestion for any camp, I know a lot of, last year when we were doing and having this conversation, I was like, all right, it's fine, it's good. I didn't actually think about doing a communicable disease plan at this time, though. I thought the world was going to come back together, and I thought we're going to be fine, and this wasn't going to be something I had to deal with. So my suggestion to those camps who are not doing camp this year and doing a virtual camp, or their camp is not until the later part of the end of the year, is still to do your communicable disease plan. That is going to aid you. That is the one thing I wish I would have done last year and started on it last year, but I thought everything was going to be fine. And now we're in the position where I've had to do a whole lot of work in a 22-page document on this communicable disease plan, plus the amendment. So a communicable disease plan doesn't mean just COVID. It means, what are you going to do if there's a big illness that goes through your camp, like the cold or flu or anything like that? And I think the next topic, which is a nice segue, is actually talking about screening and pre-screening, is that some of the things that we're going to see, we have Camp Crud. So even though our camp is in June, we still have Camp Crud. So some of this is going to be, how do we augment with these screening tools when you're dealing with what are COVID symptoms, but probably aren't COVID, and how do you do that? So we'll turn it to Kristen and go to our next segue.
Oops. Camp screening. I think there are lots of different kind of thoughts and pieces of information about what is the best COVID test and when is the best time to screen. And I'm really excited to hear what other people are doing. And we kind of have two different systems based on our camp programs, because for our river trip, we go with a professional company, and that company has their own screening tool that the BLM makes them use. So we will be using their screening tool 10 days before camp, calling every camper and every staff member, going through a screening. And then 24 hours before, we'll be calling again and going through just those health screening questions. Have you been exposed to anybody with COVID? Have you been in a crowded area? Have you been with people who are out of state that, maybe are coming from different communities? So we're going to be asking some of those questions. Do you have a fever or a cough? Have you been exposed to anything? And then the morning of, we're going to be doing the rapid test. We're using the same tests that our high schools have been using. And my June camp is an adolescent camp, so I'm guessing most of them are going to be totally used to that test, because all the athletes do it once a week, and any other kids are doing it every other week in high schools around here. So I feel like they'll be pretty comfortable with that. And then we have a PA with us on the trip, and so she will be doing daily health monitoring with every participant, and kind of going through just those questions of, are you experiencing any of these symptoms, and keeping a really close eye on things that way. Our kids camp program in August, we're going to be using Camp Doc's screening tool, which is a great tool. I don't know if anybody else out there uses Camp Doc, but they do have a screening tool, which it kind of answers those basic questions, but then you can document right in the camper's application what their answers are, and then you've got everything stored in one place. So, and again, we'll be doing the COVID test from the car, and yeah, it's a lot of just asking questions, and I think that due diligence too, and communicating about, please, the week before camp, limit, large group gatherings, limit gathering with people from out of state, kind of just be mindful of where you are and what you're doing, so that we can have the safest camp possible. And I think somebody mentioned that they were requiring vaccines. The University of Utah, that was my plan, was to require vaccines. And the University of Utah has told me that I can strongly suggest or strongly recommend vaccines, but I can't require them because it's not an FDA approved vaccine yet. It's just an emergency use approval. I know people in private camps who have been able to I have a friend who runs an amputee camp for kids at Shriners, and he has been told he's not allowed to hold camp if he doesn't require vaccines from campers and staff. So there's different philosophies out there. And I think it's important to check with your risk management group, your insurance, and who kind of your legal team to see what you can and can't do. Because I was surprised I couldn't require vaccines of staff. Yeah. What are other people doing?
Are you asking just in regards to vaccinations, Kristen?
I think what are people doing in terms of pre-screening, and then yeah, vaccinations, especially now that vaccines are open to 12 and up. Are people looking at requiring it? Are they collecting vaccine cards? Are they requiring it of staff? How are different groups approaching that?
I'll share, I guess, real briefly. It was a very robust discussion amongst our board of directors on the mandate for vaccinations or not. Where we settled was that they graciously empowered me to say that we want all of our staff to be vaccinated, but there would be case-by-case exemptions based, on the conversation with the executive director. So I really appreciated the goodwill faith for them to allow me to have that conversation with some folks, because it's not as simple as your vaxxers versus your anti-vaxxers with that. It's more nuanced than that.
Right.
So the majority of our staff will be vaccinated. We did ask the question with our campers as well. Just from a historical standpoint, I think it's great information to cultivate. Plus, it also gives you some insight on, maybe where they're at with things, especially if you got children that are 16 and above. Each state's very different, but Indiana, for as much as we all want to character assassinate our politicians and or, the mechanisms of government in general, they crushed it here in state as far as making it available for all different age groups. Got down to the teenagers quite some time ago. The other challenge we had, especially for those that have later camps, is that, and I said this with my board from some of our staff, we had some staff that are volunteers in Chicago. And I said, they might not be fully vaccinated by the time of camp, just because Illinois and Chicago in general was running further behind. So it wasn't necessarily even a matter of them not wanting to get it done. But most of our staff's from Indiana, but we've got a firefighter from LA, from California. We stole one from Daniel State. Actually, he'd been coming to Indiana for a long time. And then we've got a university professor from Washington that comes on in. And so you just have, and an engineer from St. Louis. And so you have some folks that, are from different areas. And then as far as the rest of it, we're doing, Abby might have shared this already. I apologize if I'm double dipping, but we're doing the PCR test because it's just more reliable than the rapid test in advance to camp. It's the same test if you're flying international or going to Hawaii. I don't know if those mandates have changed, but if you're coming back in the States. And then graciously, we're over holiday weekend, Memorial Day. We have volunteers that are coming in the Saturday, even Friday when staff arrive, and then Sunday when the kids come in to do that, to kind of, I guess, quote unquote, create our true bubble as best as possible. And then typical mask wearing, pods, cohorts, depending on the vernacular you use with that too. And just, I've said to my staff time and time again, the language I use is minimizing risk. We're not eliminating risk. You can't eliminate risk in anything, but you can minimize, through strategic principles and practices. And I even, for our first training, I spent the first 35 minutes talking about COVID. I think that was important that we spent that conversation because, if this call translated into a discussion on religion, politics, or COVID, those are like the three legs of the stool that you don't necessarily want to have conversations with because it can get ugly in a hurry. And so I talked to our staff right off the bat and basically said, 60 people here might have completely different impressions on exactly what we should be doing, but we need to follow that lead. We need to focus on the fact that we are in person, and that's the best thing in general, and just not necessarily look to pick apart Because I mean, even with best practices, I know you guys have gotten to this point where you're like, I don't want there to be any hypocrisy or the ideology, you know, it's questionable. It will be. I mean, even if you're creating a true bubble, if you have any kitchen staff that are preparing any food, if you have any program staff, anyone that are running into town, there's a way for that to get compromised in some case. So just minimizing risk, not eliminating it, try to keep a smile on your face, focus on loving the kids. And in 2022, hopefully all this will be gone. We'll be back completely to normal.
Cooper, I think we have a question for you. Thomas was asking who's administrating your tests.
Yes, one of our volunteers is connected to a lab and personnel in one of the donut counties of Indianapolis. So we really, and I know, Daniel, I think you've got local health officials doing yours. I don't want to speak for you in those regards, but it might be different for each area. I think if you reach out, you know, you just create a large footprint of ask, you're likely to get somebody based on what you do, and they're empathetic towards it being a child-based cause. And obviously with burn survivors, likely someone will step up to the table. You might just have to uncover a few stones to get to that point. But in our particular instance, I went through our volunteer group first, feeling like their passion is going to mirror mine. They'll be able to make that ask in a way that will likely bear fruit. And like I said, even through a holiday weekend, Memorial Day, we've got folks willing to do that. So fortunately, it's worked out well for us. It hasn't been super easy as advocate of test. There's some nuances that we've had to go through to get to where we're at, but that's kind of our journey.
Yeah, one interesting nuance we found is, so the health department donated 185 tests to us, and we'll probably need to get another batch before our kids camp, because we'll run through some of those at our adolescent program. But anybody can administer the tests. So we're having RNs do that because we have such a robust group of RNs who really want to help. And I love the idea of having them in costume, Daniel. I think that's really fun. But only the person who is kind of certified by the health department, and there's a terminology for that, and I forget what it is, but they're the only person who's allowed to enter results into the health department's database. So that person will have to be on hand for all camp check-ins, and she will have to, be the only one entering all that information. So that was one thing that we found that we didn't expect. We kind of thought, well, any RN can enter the information, and that's just not so.
Is anyone at camp, or since I'll take Kristen's lead. Hi, Valerie from the Firefighters Burn Institute / Firefighters Kids Camp / Little Heroes Preschool Burn Camp in California. Is anyone in camp long enough that they're doing a second test or considering an additional test after the screening in the beginning to enter?
I think I mentioned this before. There's 3 tests that they have to do. So there's the PCR test that they have to do within 72 hours before showing up to camp. And that's for everybody. It's a PCR test. There's the rapid test that we got. Krupa was saying we did get a donation. So I actually reached out to California Public Health, and they're the ones who gave us 650 rapid tests. I wanted less, but that's how much they're giving me. So I'm taking them all and I'll use them throughout the year. They're allowing us to have our medical team actually administrate them. And they're also giving us some PCR tests, because if they do come back with the rapid test as a positive, they would like us to do a PCR test and send it out to the lab to confirm, so that they have it on the records that there's a potential person who is exposed. And they're doing a training for us, and all those were donated and free of charge. So anyone, I would really encourage you to reach out to your public state health department. And then we're doing a 3rd test before they leave to ensure that we're not sending any kid home with COVID. So that one, and then the staff, I think, are going to optionally do it if they want to do it. I'm a little less concerned with our volunteers, but I think we're probably going to ask them all to do it. But if they refuse to do it, that's up to them. But the kids also will get that last test. Cool. Well, if there's no other questions or comments about screenings and tests and all that, we can go into our next topic, which was going to be isolation quarantine for suspected cases. So this is what we were talking about earlier when I said, like, how do we differentiate the cold, the flu, the camp crud from COVID symptoms, and what are our plans? So you know, I would love to, I feel like I've been talking already way too much in this meeting. So I'd love to hear what camps are doing, and I can throw out some stuff in the chat, but feel free to use the chat also if you want to just communicate what you guys are doing. But, you know, when it comes to, you have a suspected case of COVID or a positive case for COVID, how are you guys handling isolation and quarantine at camp?
I know that we're setting aside at least 2 cabins to be like empty, and hopefully we never have to put anyone in them for that isolation and quarantine. And we're also there's gonna be a designated room in the medical center for, you know, when they're trying to figure out if this is, you know, a suspected COVID case or allergies or whatever. So that's kind of where our medical team has landed with that right now.
We're pretty similar. We've always had like a camp nurse room within our main lodge. And we're looking at doing a couple of pop-up tents kind of spaced apart, that have the ones that have those 3 sides. We just have kind of limited space at our facility. And so we might have and we'll have separate kind of nurses for each tent. So we won't have, if a kiddo is suspected of having COVID, they're not going to be treated by the same nurse who would be treating the kids with the stomach bug or dehydration or the bees, you know, bee sting or whatever. So we're trying to kind of separate things out that way also. We'll have some cots in those little pop-up tents. And I feel like the kids might actually enjoy that outdoor experience, because then they will still be able to see what's going on around them, or we can pull the extra wall if they really need some privacy. Kind of thinking outside the box with limited space. I might be the only one with limited space, but man, our space is limited.
We are also doing 2 medical teams. So we have 2 medical doctors, one for camp and then one for COVID. And the COVID team is going to be administering a lot of the tests in the beginning part, as well as just be there and hopefully have the easiest week at camp ever and have no cases ever. That is our hope, and our goal is that they do nothing at camp besides just sit there. We also, to alleviate a lot of people going into medical and taxing our medical staff on both sides, we've done first aid kits for all of our cabins that the counselors will be able to take with them and travel with them in between activities to alleviate the scratches and boobies and everything else that normally gets administered by our medical team. And then we are also have a separate area for them to be quarantined. We're communicating to our families that if it is a positive test, that it is 24 hours is the max that we will hold a kid at our facility, and that once they are notified that their child has a positive result, that they have 24 hours to come and pick up their kid. And that is on them, that they need to get there at any point to come get them. And it's a health concern, not only for their child, but also for the rest of camp. So we're really pushing that, and hopefully that will be clear. We have some fear that some parents are going to go on vacation or go and not be around during camp and then not able to pick up their kid, or they don't have the funds or transportation to get them. So we're trying to figure out what are alternative options. But right now we've decided no volunteer will be traveling, and we can't transport them if they're a positive case. All we can do is put them in quarantine and have the proper PPE and make sure that they have the food and the space that they need. It's a quiet group today, guys.
I was just going to say, when you're talking about the limited space, that I've always been happy that we've had a lot of space, but never have I realized how much for granted we took it until this year. Like being able to do things and spread out has Whew, that's bigger than ever before. It's crazy.
See, look at all the opportunities for gratitude COVID is giving us. What are people doing just in terms of adaptations to activities that you've done that have always been like the big group activities? How are you guys what adaptations have people made for those?
Yeah, I'll go. Tim, Colorado Burn Camps program. We are planning to run almost 3 separate programs within camp, meaning our program is 8 to 18-year-olds. However, we tend towards the older. Usually about half of camp, about 75% of camp is our older campers, usually teenagers and above. So we're looking to split those populations up into 2 pods and then have a younger pod. And so for those campfires, for talent shows, those kinds of things, we're looking to do 3 individual large group activities. So if we end up doing like talent show together, we would move it to an outside pavilion. It's like outside bleachers that are in the round, and we would have enough room to spread out, but it wouldn't be inside like we've done it in a cabin in the past. So really thinking through, and a little bit like the 2 separate medical staffs, what we're looking at doing is from top to bottom, analyzing our staff roster to make sure that we have the talent and medical and counselor and all of the depth in each of those camps, instead of having 1 or 2 people to do it for the whole camp. So bringing in additional staff and having from top to bottom almost a full camp staff for each of those different pods, so that we can continue to stay socially distanced and not gather in large groups.
Same, we're doing everything outdoors. Everything, as much as the only time you're gonna be indoors is essentially to sleep. Everything else is completely outdoors. It is completely in your family groups or your pods. I will say I'm looking for ideas for what people are doing related to their dance. Our leadership doesn't feel like an outdoor dance is going to be fun and the kids are going to like it as much. I even threw out the idea of doing a silent disco, which is where you wear the headphones and you listen to whatever music you want and dance. They just think it logistically, especially because we do our dance at night with the lights, the sounds, and then also being outside, maybe the sound audience, we would be breaking that if we're too loud, that they're a little concerned with that. And they're trying to figure out other ways. And we talked about even like doing spray painted marked areas like dance here in your family group. So they're a little concerned with that. They just don't think the kids are going to enjoy it as much. So if anyone has creative ideas around the dance, totally would love. Also, I would love ideas regarding like just physical contact in any regards. We are a really big hugging community. We call it e-hugs, and we hug everybody, and you get multiple hugs a day. So for us to have camp this year is going to be really difficult. So trying to figure out creative ways of like having like a hugging station or appropriate PPE, or people are doing hugs within their family groups or their pods. I think that's going to be a huge one for us.
I think just general contact with the hugs. Number one, I have to say this because I say this to our team all the time. Like, if our kids' families had any idea how many hours that we put in before camp, I mean, it would just shock them. Here we are talking about public affection, within our network. It always kind of cracks me up. And I love that I've got this network to kind of share that with, because it just, again, they have no idea. But when it comes to affection, what I'm going to share with our staff, I don't think we're going to set up anything like hugging stations or anything specific, at least along our lines. I think it's a good idea. And obviously everything's going to work with different networks, appropriately in your culture and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take it almost like what I would consider the schools do with mask wearing. Like, you can wear yourself out. You're going to do your best. And I'm not saying take a defeatist principle, but you got to choose your battles wisely. Reminders every once in a while, kind of go over your public affection, policies, like maybe every other day or something along those lines. But I'm going to try to have us err on the side of love. The adults are obviously going to be better equipped than the kids, through training and remembering and things of that nature. I think we want to minimize risk as best as we can. It's all about minimizing risk, but at the same token, if something happens, which it probably invariably will, all camp every single year, you make the plans, doesn't exactly go according to plan, and then you adjust as best as you can with that too. I had a great conversation with somebody. I was up in kind of the northwest part of the state the other day about how touch has been the sense that has been compromised the most during COVID. Like, we still have our sight, we still have our hearing, but touch, just human contact has been so challenged. So I think, without sounding really wishy-washy and ambiguous, I think that we're going to hopefully allow some limitations of that, but I guess I don't want to get too angry or uptight throughout the process. We'll put some basic measures in place, and then if it kind of, if it gets really out of hand, like we have gators and mules and all these support vehicles at camp, I always say in training, go slow. And then I don't usually police it unless I get midweek and I see everybody going fast. There's your reminder. Everybody needs to hear it once. That's probably what I'll do with public displays of affection, just because I think our population needs it. It's just a weird, hard thing to police. Like, if anybody else has other feedback too, I'd love to hear it, because that is like probably one of the hardest things for us to figure out through our week too.
So this is the devil's advocate thing, but the CDC says that you have to be in close proximity for 15 minutes for it to be a danger. So y'all aren't hugging for 15 minutes, are you?
I mean, there's affection and there's creepy. That would probably
right,
be
right, because that would be that fall on the creepy line. And the other thing I saw, I had read this article just about teaching kids about kind of like feeling a sense of mastery and ownership over their physical bodies. And there was a kindergarten teacher that every day let the kids pick if they wanted to fist bump, handshake, elbow bump, or like do a dance when they walked into class. And I wanted to implement that as kids were coming in for meals, but it kind of takes a while. But she would have, like, this teacher had different kids rotate being the monitor of that. And so that, like, the welcomer kid, the monitor would stand at the doorway and go fist bump, handshake, elbow bump, dance. And then the kids would like really quickly say which one they wanted. And so I think there are opportunities to look at different ways of physically connecting with kids and still giving them some of that physical, like, kids crave physical closeness. And then COVID has, like, I remember the little girls who lived next door to me, when they found out I got vaccinated, they sent their mom over. They came with, and the mom said, they have a question for you about your vaccine, Kristen. And I was like, yes, what's their question? And she said, they want to know if they can have a hug now. Like, of all the things, that's what, and I think that's on kids' minds in general. Like, people that they were used to running up to and touching in any way, like with their friends or their peers or grownups that they trusted. That physical contact has really changed this past year. And like, Daniel, when you get back into your community with the culture that has been set up, it might be really awkward to set different guidelines. And yeah, but I don't know. I liked what that teacher was doing a lot.
I stepped away for a second, but I saw, like, recently an ad on for like from Oriental Trading or something, like wristbands that you can customize that are color coded based on what the kids are comfortable with or what they would like. I'm good with a hug, I'm not good with a hug, I'm whatever. So those are out there too.
Great ideas, everyone. I love this conversation. It's good for me too to like, I think we've been so COVID. I wouldn't say we're operating from fear, but we're operating from a place of being ultra conservative with everything we're doing. And I think that's part of like what we have to do as an organization. Being out in California, I also think plays a lot of factor into some of these hoops that we're having to jump through as an organization and through my board and through public health and other things. But I love hearing what other camps are doing and how you guys are processing. This is good feedback to go back to my board and say, hey, listen, this is what other people are thinking. Because I agree. I think this is definitely something that's on all our minds is physical touch and then being creative on. And I love all those suggestions, Kristen and everyone else who threw out those. So cool. We have about 5 minutes left. We had a few other topics that we were going to discuss for today, but I actually think like, why don't we just open it up for anyone who has a question that they just want to ask the group of what they're doing in terms of operations and logistics regarding camp, and we can save some of these topics for a later meeting.
But our camp is before the next meeting, so we need all the topics right now. So, I mean, whatever you can do to make that happen would be fantastic.
Great.
We'll show up with the next meeting telling you all the areas we screwed up in, like the whole complement of it. We might need 2 hours or longer for that.
Well, we're excited. So you guys are, your camp is what's your dates?
We will have our staff gather a week from today, a percentage of them. We start our training on that Saturday, roughly 9 a.m. So, and we'll run through June 4th.
Wow. Well, you guys will be, I think, the first in-person children's camp that I know of who's operated. I know that Anita had a day event, and then I know that Maddie did an in-person young adult program, but you guys maybe, and I know Valerie at FFPI did an adult retreat, but you guys may be the first children's camp to then operate.
Yep, ready or not, here it comes. We are in that 11th hour, so we're looking forward to it. I mean, like every year, there's a labor of love that goes into it, but man, I just can't wait to see our people again. I got a general question. Do we know if the IAFF camp is taking place this year?
I spoke with Tom, and he said,
Hello there.
Oh, is that Grandpa?
You know, I've been on the phone listening intently, and I was starting to feel pretty good, and then I was listening to all the conversation, and I'm wondering why I'm even contemplating doing it. To answer the question quickly, because I know you don't have a lot of time, we have not made the ultimate decision yet. I have sent a list of about 8 things that I wanted answered from our hierarchy, and we will probably be making a decision by the end of the first week of June. If we're going to move forward, if that answers that.
I think the IAFF camp, there's so many interesting factors because it's campers and counselors coming from around the country. So there's the people from around the country and then people traveling through airports, and kind of the goals and intentions of IAFF camp and how they're different than kind of the traditional camp. Tom he's being modest. He's put so much time and energy and research into this question. So a lot of work and thought is going into whether or not to hold IAFF camp. I just know that because I've been on some of the calls, and I know a small part of the work that Tom's been doing on it.
My vote, Tom, is if you don't have an in-person camp with the kids, you just fly us all out for a beer. So that's my proposal.
Yes. Well, or that could be the workshop. The workshop is happening in person.
We're on to something
And
here.
yes, and we'll be getting more information out about the workshop soon. But that is happening in person, and we're looking at having it be smaller with maybe more of a leadership team approach. Tim could probably speak the best to our vision for that.
Sheldon Gregoire, Portland Firefighters Camp again. Hey, real quick while Tom's on, because I didn't realize Tom was on because I didn't recognize the 202 number. Tom, based on, because we did not have camp this year because of COVID, we were right in the middle of that after holiday spike. But we did have camp last year before everybody else didn't have camp. In the opposite of everybody on this call of they didn't have camp last year, they're getting to do it this year. We got to do it last year, but not do it this year. Our camper of the year for last year, I think might have aged up. Are you gonna give some leniency to that, Tom, in terms of the aging of the kids going to IAFF camp, or how might that knowing that you might not have camp?
Yes, just the quick answer to that is yes, we raised the age from 14 to 16. We did not want young people to be penalized for the fact that they had nothing to do with circumstances. And if that was the young person who the camp had chosen to come, they're coming.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's not an issue.
Thank you very much, Tom, for that clarification. That was very helpful.
I love that question. Just for contextual standpoint too, we have about, I know at least 2 campers that would have quote unquote aged out and could have been in our transition program to be counselors. They opted to be campers. They realized they could be staff, and these are really great kids that I think will eventually be phenomenal staffers. And so organizationally, throughout all of 2021, 19 for us is the new 18. So I think that's a very thoughtful question, Sheldon. I think that's a great, just want to compliment you, Tom, with that decision. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, we didn't want the kids to be penalized.
I was going to say camps was tough to make the hard decision about which one camper to send, because Tom's not letting us send 2 from each camp, but it is really great to know that we can, those kids that we would have given the opportunity to last year.
But like I said, you guys didn't have campers of the year last year. We did. This year I don't. I do. It's Patrick Dempsey.
What about Patrick Dempsey? Did I?
Not the actor.
He's got direct connections with McDreamy. Sheldon.
Yeah. So Kristen, you might not have been on the last one, or I missed. Patrick, one of my counselors trained Patrick boxing in one of his movies.
Oh.
So I have a direct connection, and Patrick Dempsey did a full FaceTime video live chat with all my campers during our 2-hour virtual Fire Nice Winter Camp this year. And he's actually still trying to find time to come up and ski with the kids. But so he was my camper of the year this year.
If you guys want Dempsey's number, I can give it to you real quick. It's 202-412. Write that down and call. We'd love to hear from you.
Pass it around.
I hear late at night's the best time to call.
Yeah, mid-morning, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
I spent a lot of time up at those hours in my career too, by the way.
Yes, you did. Hey, Tom, I have a question for you after this call. Can I call you?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you need the number?
Just call Patrick Dempsey.
Okay, we're finally getting to behave like camp people on Zoom. I feel like we've been very formal with all these calls. Except the one where Mackenzie told us the chainsaw story.
All right, are we all caught up and ready to move on to the next one? Yeah, all right.
Oh, boy.
Next up on the list is inside gatherings, eating and sleeping indoors. And this goes to kind of what Daniel said, just do everything outside. But seriously, I do think for a lot of camps that those are the two potential pinch points for COVID infection. So some things you can do to minimize risk when you're indoors. One is minimize attendance capacity inside. So whether that's reducing cabin capacity, being cognizant of how specifically in cabins, campers are sleeping, i.e. don't have campers sleeping head to head. You know, if you can skip bunks, if you can skip beds, if you can spread kids out in the sleeping environment, that is ideal. Another one is with the eating, again, reducing capacity. So whether that means eating in pods, eating in shifts, using the entire space to push tables out or away from each other. We got lucky in the camp where we hold summer camp, built an outdoor kind of pavilion for eating. So there's going to be an outdoor ventilated space for kids to eat. So doing those kinds of things, really being cognizant of when you're inside and not being able to wear masks, sleeping and eating, that you're staying as distant as possible, but wanting to hear what other people are thinking and doing about that. Good talk, Russ.
I think all those things, we, again, with size limitation for our facility, we actually had to split our camp into 2 sessions because we typically have about 14 people in each cabin between the counselors and the campers. And we had to, and we just don't have enough cabins to expand bigger. So we split our camp into 2 sessions. So that we'll have the younger half of the kids up and then we'll have the older half of the kids up, which will allow us to have about 6 to 7 people per cabin instead of about 12 to 14. That was a super hard choice to make. None of us love it, but that was one of the things that allowed us to kind of move forward with in-person programming. That also then reduces the numbers of people inside. So even if we do need to eat inside the lodge, it does make it a little bit more, we're able to space tables out and keep kids sitting at the big tables with their cabin group and just have them spaced out more. And our lodge has a huge vaulted roof with lots of air circulation. So if, we've got thunderstorms or whatever, and we need to eat inside, we feel pretty good about being able to space people out. But yeah, that was a hard decision that we had to make about numbers and sleeping and yeah.
Our cabin sizes got reduced down. We normally put 10 people in a cabin, and now we're at 6 people, 4 campers, 2 adults. In addition to that, our board and part of our communicable disease is reducing our camp size by 33% overall. So even though we have the space and the capacity to have more, they wanted us just in general to have a smaller camp because I guess it's the risk of a larger, more people meant scarier for people, even though a lot of it was going to be outdoors. So we had a capacity of only 100 kids, and that went really fast. All of our kids signed up really fast, so I had a long wait list. So if anyone's looking to take some kids, I have some from California that I can send your way and ship out to you. So that made it a little difficult. We also, I mentioned before, we have a fobbing machine that we'll be doing, cleaning the rooms every day where the kids are at activities, as well as we went through PG&E, which is our electrical company here in California, gave us a nice sum of money to go and buy air purifiers, which we'll just keep in the rooms and have. And honestly, we'll have those even outside of COVID because it's, again, camp cred. And the more we can get out of the pollination and everything else that's going on through camp and germs, we want to. So we also have those air purifiers that we have to set up in those room that we need that we sleep in.
Oh, I was going to also say for our adolescent program that BLM actually came through with size restrictions on groups coming through the canyons. And so our adolescent trip has been reduced to 20 people total. So it will also be a much smaller camp. Bye, Abby.
Well, maybe that's a good transition to the last topic, Daniel, the cleaning with your fog machine. That sounds awesome.
We actually, so like, I guess like within that too, we didn't know what was the solution within it, but I think we had people who were like, what kind of chemicals are you putting in the room?
Right.
You don't have COVID, but you're going to be inhaling something. But actually we found that it's a water solvent. So it's just basically salt particles that break into the atmosphere. I have no clue. It was a donation. We weren't seeking out this donation. It was given to us by the local fire department, who was like, hey, we use this in our engine and APE because we got it. So I'm like, all right, we'll use it for a week. So yes. What are other people doing when it comes to sanitation guidelines regarding COVID?
I feel like I'm talking all the time. But this might be something other people can utilize. We, partner with a lot of the disaster cleanup companies. They love Burn Camp. And so we have one of the disaster companies coming up before camp and then one coming up in between the two sessions to kind of do a deep clean of the cabins and the lodge. And then we're also gonna get the carpet in the lodge and in the there's this little director's cabin that used to be where the camp caretaker lived, and it's been empty now for a year. So we're gonna get the carpet in there cleaned too. So that's one of the things we're doing is we're going to be relying on those professional disaster cleaning companies to help us.
We're primarily just going to have, general cleaning before and after each use by everybody, just to have that norm. We might be getting some special misters. I'm not certain they came in or not. But, people say they're going to get it, but then do they really get it? I don't know.
That's so true.
We were like, so we got like less applicants coming in, and I hate to say we never want to turn any kid away, but we're hoping the level stays this way. It's a little bit more manageable to spread them out. And like just kind of general attrition, we got less staff to come back because I just I haven't told any staff besides 2 people that they couldn't come, but a lot of people backed out anyway. Just kind of naturally occurred like that. I always wanted to ask, like, we keep in touch with, it used to be Rico's down at Shelley's camp, who the camper of the year is. So sometimes we have our vote to find out that this kid's already going up to the main camp. So, and then when I see the pictures, I'm like, oh, that kid, there's like 2 other kids from our camp that are gone because they go to all your camps as well, They have the network, so they've gone from camp to camp. So, who you planning to send this year, Shelley?
So yeah, our camper of the year was Facci, Johnny.
Okay.
Facci.
Yeah, Rico told me that.
So he's, all things considered, with any luck, he'll be going to IFF camp 2021. And I agree with you. Like we constantly, with Connecticut camp, buddy, with you, it's one of those. we have a lot of the same kids, you know, which is why our camp is when our camp is we didn't want to compete with Connecticut. It's not like we're trying to compete with anything.
You can't.
Right. We, yeah, well, you can't compete with us. But no, we wanted to provide another opportunity for kids. We've had kids from Texas and Michigan and all around in Maine in the wintertime. So, but yeah, Facci's our guy. He's going with Jason Quirk if all works out to the way I want it to.
Yeah, Quirk applied last year. I didn't hear from him this year. So.
Yeah, I'll read him. He's a good guy. He's the one that knows McDreamy. So I will take McDreamy as the Portland connection, but Quirky's the one that knows. He's a good man. He's a great fireman, great paramedic, great person, and he's amazing with the kids. Amazing. So I'll give him a shout and let him know if he's thinking about it still to reach out.
I don't know. Time's kind of already passed already, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll still consider him because you never know. Because when we tell people got vaccinated, it's going to give a different picture of what the staff's going to look like. Because I know 2 people who can't get it, contraindication. So it's not like, you know, people might not get it because of political reasons or whatever personal reasons, and I'm not really too concerned. You know, that's definitely been going on this year. But there are people who legitimately can't get it. And my personal thing doesn't make a difference if you're vaccinated or not. That protects you, doesn't protect anybody else. Because theoretically, you can still be a carrier. So, but
yeah, I don't know what his status is, but I'll touch base with him. I don't know. Again, he's had a lot going on, so I'll touch base with him and see what he does.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Is Dempsey still on 202? Is the ages for the IFF, is it 13, 14, and 15? I know you're doing a consideration for last year, but is it normally those are the ages?
Yeah, normally 13. If they turn 16 in between the end of a regional camp and the start of our camp, then we let 16-year-olds go. Yeah, this year it's going to be 14 to 16, provided we have it. And if they would have turned 17 in between the end of the regional camp and the start of ours, we would also let them come, if that's going to be the case.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Tom, real quick question. Are you going to, not really complicate things, but are you going to have a day where if me, my program director and I want to come down and chat with you and a couple of your guys, if this is not the year, it's not the year, no big deal. But Ross and I have been trying to we want to strengthen our ties with Connecticut just because of our geographical location. And, you know, I've always wanted to come down. A lot of my campers say, hey, come be a counselor at summer camp. But I tell them, if you want to see me, come to winter camp. And, but I would like to, at some point, someday, see your operation down there.
Right now, this year, we're trying to have no visitors, but things keep on changing day by day. And I tell the foundation I want to make the most stringent restrictions today and peel them off as we're getting closer. But as Mark pointed out earlier, you know, it is no matter what we do, there's going to be a risk. But yeah,
that works for me. I just figured I'd reach out.
Thanks.
All righty. Well, there's nothing else. Thank you all for joining us today. I always find these so helpful. It's always great to see everybody, great to hear from everyone, and mix in ideas from all over the country. Stay tuned about June. I think we're still trying to decide how big our attendance is going to be for June. So we may or may not have one in June, but we for sure will be back up and running in July again for everybody. All right. Daniel, Kristen, anything else?
No, thanks everyone for coming. I have loved these talks that we've been doing since really the start of COVID. I think it's given me also a really great window into what other camps around the country are doing and who, I see names come across, a list or whatever, but it's been really nice to put some faces to that. So yay, thanks for calling in.
All right. Thanks all. Have a great weekend.